I think dumbbell walking lunge is the gold standard of lower body function. And as I go down this list today, this is kind of what I'm getting at. This is gold standard, and each of these will have a regression. And I'd keep in mind that the regression for these things might be 3 different movements. And that's something that we can expand on in the future. We can talk about it. If you guys are in the prescript labs, we can bring it up. We can have conversations about it. But these are going to be very complex movement patterns. And the reason for that is that it's going to integrate, like I said, different body regions with the intention of allowing a level of stability, range of motion, coordination, and awareness, really, that transfers to allow us to train for a long period of time. So if you're not, or your clients are not at a point where they can do this complex of a movement yet, the goal is to get them to the point where they can do these 4 movements, and they could do them forever. And once you get to that point, you're at a point where you have enough awareness, you have enough stability, you have the range of motion to do any other movement in the gym long term, and it will enhance your ability to train for a longer period of time. Okay, so back to number 1, dumbbell walking lunge. Now, there's a ton of benefit to a dumbbell walking lunge globally throughout every single body region. And we can start with some of the more minors, is that holding dumbbells in your hand, to be able to have the grip strength to do this, and if we're talking like a set of 20 reps or 20 steps, like it's a sustained period of time. That's like, I don't know, 40 seconds to a minute, depending on how quickly or slowly you move. But the grip strength that requires, it's going to, the bottleneck to grip strength is going to be stability through the wrist, the elbow, the glenohumeral joint, and the scapulothoracic joint, right? So for us to be able to stabilize and coordinate all of those things, and there is a degree of kind of scapular rotation that is important here. And we'll talk about this more as we get to the upper body, but I'll circle back to that point. But essentially saying that I'm going to hold on to dumbbells for a minute, give or take, is saying that I have the ability to coordinate upper body stability enough to produce force distally as it gets, my hand. So that's one of the, like I said, that's further down the list, but that is kind of one of the considerations of this being on this short list of 4 exercises. That's the benefit through the upper body. Now, through the core, not as much benefit through this movement particularly as there is the next one, or some of the other ones that I'll say on this list. But it's axial compression, right? So it gives us some sort of stimulus of us learning the strategy to deal with axial compression against load. So with that, I think axial compression helps enhance our understanding of core bracing versus shear force, like a shear force through the spine. That really forces us to execute on our spinal bracing. It requires a lot more awareness. It's not as intuitive. So that's something that is a bit more of a learning piece. Compression makes it a little bit easier. So with that, everything's like the gravitational forces are pulling straight down in alignment with our spine as we go through this. Now, that is kind of getting us to the primary benefit of this, is as we look at the integration of body regions. Yes, we have the shoulder, but really what I'm going to focus on here is the connection of the foot to the pelvis and lumbar spine. All right, that's the integration that we're going to learn through a walking lunge. So as we go through this, we're going through kind of gait cycle blown out of proportion to its fullest extent, right? Our front leg, we're in hip flexion, abduction, external rotation. In our rear leg, we're getting into extension, internal rotation, and adduction. So we're taking the hip through generally full range of motion. There's a good degree of rotation, the ball and socket joint at the hip, where you'll notice a theme as we go through these. Rotation is stability, right? the way that we stabilize at the joints that require the most stability in our body. And that would be essentially our hip, the ball and socket of our hip, the ball and socket of our shoulder. And we can even look at the spine in this way. Like, this is another aside, is that movement is rotation, right? We are rotating through one or multiple planes, actually all planes always. But if we look at which plane we're primarily moving through, like an RDL, it's rotation through that sagittal plane, right? If that makes sense. So as we look at stability on the whole, rotation is going to be the primary quality that I'm looking at, right? So and rotation not necessarily aligned with gravity. Like in RDL, we're moving through the sagittal plane. We're kind of rotating in alignment with gravity. We're talking 90 degrees, like rotation at the hip. We're talking internal, external rotation. Or working not independent of gravity, but within a different plane than gravity is acting on us. And that is stability. So what I'm learning is I'm learning to connect the way that my hip moves, and for my hip to move through full range of motion here, I need to have stability at the pelvis. So that creates a demand for core stability, or some sort of understanding of how to resist movement at the pelvis and allow movement at the ball and socket of the hip, which is, it's going to transfer to every single movement that was on Shallow's list for the lower body. Is sometimes there's external stability involved, sometimes there's not. The less external stability we have, the more we need to create internally for us to have a level of output that will have any sort of impact on our performance, period. So we're learning how to stabilize the pelvis while control the movement at the hip. And then from here, the important link, the thing that we're not going to get from too many other exercises, is the implication of hip rotation through all three planes on how our foot contacts the ground, right? We need to have some sort of coordination. It goes both ways, between how we're moving at the hip and how it's going to influence our foot strike on the ground, and where we bear weight on that foot, where our foot pressure is, where essentially our base of support, our balance is. That's going to be our foot. And then vice versa, is that the awareness at the foot allows us to get into the requisite positions of the hip. Like if I don't have any understanding of foot pressure, then I'm just going to be compensating through tibial rotation, through rotation at the hip joint, and then probably upstream into the SI joint, the lumbar spine, the contralateral shoulder. So dumbbell, walking, lunge. The benefit here, kind of all the way around, is we're understanding how we're building an understanding and awareness and a capacity to execute on how foot pressure relates to hip rotation. We have that kind of link between pelvic stability, or like core activation, and hip movement, and the integration into all the way downstream to the foot. And then I kind of mentioned this, but the way that the orientation of our rib cage to our pelvis is going to affect our ability to stabilize at the scapula, and then distal to that for the grip strap. So number one spot, these aren't in order. They're all number one for 4 different intentions. So number one spot for this intention, connecting the foot to the hip and even the shoulder, dumbbell walking lunge. Number 2. Now, this one, we're going to, a lot of overlap, but we're kind of tipping the scales. It's going to be a B stance RDL. And anyone who's listened to me say anything for the past, I don't know when I got onto this, maybe 7 years, has probably heard me talk about the B stance RDL in one capacity or another. The reason I think this is such a valuable movement is now we're kind of doing all the same things I just mentioned, is that we're learning to integrate foot pressure to hip rotation, to core stability, to rib cage to pelvis orientation to scapular stability to distal grip strength. We're doing all of those things. But if we had an intensity dial on the dumbbell walking lunge, that intensity dial is dialed more towards lower body. And now the intensity dial on the B stance RDL is kind of tipped more towards pelvis, core, rib cage orientation, right? It's going to put all these things on trial because I mentioned earlier in the dumbbell walking lunge, it's a lot more up and down movement, right? It's a lot more compressive forces through the spine, through the torso, through the way that we're going to use the core to resist gravity.